Hello everybody and welcome to my Games of the Year list for 2023. This is a new thing I'm trying on the channel, but I thought I'd give it a go, it seems fun. A few things to get out of the way. This is only going to be for games that I've actually played in 2023 and have been released in 2023. So some very popular games this year like Baldur's Gate 3 and Dave the Diver I will not be including in this list simply because I have not played them and it would be unfair to do so. Because I've not played too many new games in 2023, this will be a top 5 tier list, and there will be a couple of honourable mentions for games which didn't quite make the cut for one reason or another, but that I still think deserve an honourable mention. Up first is Hogwarts Legacy, a game which divided people as to its qualities and its merits, but it was a game that I really enjoyed. I played it in my own time, I didn't play it on the channel, but it was a game that, for me, dealt with the nostalgia that I had for the Harry Potter universe and the Wizarding World, and it was something that I really enjoyed playing. Now, I'm not under any illusion that a lot of that love and care that I have for that game has come out of nostalgia for the universe that has been created. You know, there were some problems with the game for sure. Initially, there's quite a few frame issues I found for myself at least. And I also found that some of the voice acting could be a little flat. Certainly the lead male actor I found to sometimes be a little bit flat. That's not anything against the actor himself, but I think perhaps the direction that he was given. And sometimes the world could feel a little bit empty, but when it worked, it really worked. The combat I felt was really good. And so all the other kind of Harry Potter games I played in the past was pretty simple in terms of combat. This was a lot more kind of open in terms of what you could do, and that was a really cool thing. You know, you could put spells together, you could create great combinations of spells, but also just exploring the world. The world sometimes felt really, really good. Like when bits worked, it was magical, and exploring not only the common rooms for the first time, but actually turning up to Hogwarts for the first time was such a special thing for me, a special moment. And you know, despite the many problems that I have with J.K. Rowling as a person, I still feel like it deserves a place on this list, but only at position 5, purely because there was quite a few issues. In at number 4 is Tin Hearts, a wonderful little game, a puzzle game, which is something I'm not particularly fond of normally, but this game is something which has managed to push me past my hatred of puzzle games for the most part. I've only really ever enjoyed 2 puzzle games, this one and Valiant Hearts The Great War, set in World War One. It works, and it's really good, and I enjoy it, which is something I never normally do for puzzle games. The maps are open, they're not constricted. There's obviously certain ways to do things, but it feels a bit more open. There's a little bit of freedom of movement later on in the campaign, and it's a really lovely little game, and it's got a lovely story attached to it, which is usually how I get myself to actually play puzzle games like Valiant Hearts Great War and this one here, Tin Hearts, because I feel like puzzle games need stories to attach to, otherwise it doesn't make me interested in the game. You know, with something such as strategy or action, I can kind of create my own stories in my head because I'm the one directing all the soldiers, or you know, trying to make an economy. I can create my own stories, but with puzzles I find that's a lot harder to do, so having a really solid story beside it is great. And actually I'm still playing it at the moment, I haven't finished it yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing where the story is even going to go from here. But it's just nice to have a puzzle game that actually works for me, because it's such a rarity. However, there are a few issues. I find sometimes when you're moving the blocks around, the puzzle pieces, it can sometimes be a little troublesome, because they kind of float through the air and they can sometimes get stuck, and also the directions, trying to direct a cannon or a certain thing to move in a certain direction can sometimes prove a little bit troublesome. Maybe that's because I'm playing on mouse and keyboard and not with the controller, I'm not entirely sure, but those are a few things that I find a little bit frustrating. That being said, it's truly an excellent game and well deserving of spot 4 here. In at number 3 is Lakeburg Legacies, a game that was very, very popular for the channel. It was by far my most popular video and playlist and series as a whole, and brought a lot of new people to the channel, which I was always very grateful for. So why is it not on number 1? Well, it's a game that I really enjoyed. I think it's a really good game for kind of world building. You have all these NPCs and you get them married and you get them to have children, and it's a really good way for creating stories in your head and having some wonderful interactions between the characters. But sometimes it could be a little cumbersome to try and make things work. You know, the dating game, at least when I played it back in kind of July time, it was always the same. So once you had played it a few times, it was always the same pretty much going forward. And so it got a bit lackluster at points in terms of kind of how the longevity of the game after the first kind of few hours of playing, it did sometimes feel a little bit cumbersome to play at points. Not because there was anything wrong with the inherent game as a whole. You know, there was no real frame issues, there was no kind of quality of life issues, but I did find that there could have been a little bit more to add into the game, and it could have really done with that extra depth, because towards the late game it became more of a chore and a bit of management than it was to actually. You had too many villagers to take care of, and it became a little bit tough to actually care about each individual person, even when there was some really, really wonderful stories being created. And that's a shame, because I would have liked to spend more time with my villagers towards the end as the game drew to a close after 75 years of being with my village. And the artwork is lovely, the whole kind of atmosphere, it's very cozy, it's cute, it's wonderful, but just a few things here and there perhaps could have been improved on, and it would have made a really, really strong tier 2 or tier 1, I don't know, I'm saying tiers, a really strong contender for place 2 or 1 on this list. In at number 2 is A Highlands Song, a game I've really connected with recently. It's a game about a girl called Moira up in the Scottish Highlands who's travelling throughout the hills, the valleys, the lakes, the lochs to go visit her uncle Hamish. And it's just a really, really wonderful game. You learn a lot about Scottish culture, you learn a lot about the music, you get to see some truly gorgeous artwork of the Scottish Highlands. It's not a particularly complicated game, but it's also made by the same company that made 80 Days back in the day, and that was one of my first series on this channel. I really enjoyed that. And it's something I really connected with, because I spent some time with my family driving through the Scottish Highlands a long time ago now, possibly 10 years, but maybe even longer, and it gave me this same sense of adventure, but also kind of appreciation for nature, for our world, and everything like that. And it, this reignited something within me to kind of go and revisit the Scottish Highlands and have that same experience, which was such a wonderful experience. And it would be really lovely to experience that again. And this game just works with everything comes together. The music, the artwork, the story, the voice acting is very good as well, and really does deserve a spot 2 on this list. Before we get to the number 1 spot, let's have a look at a couple of honourable mentions. First up is Stronghold Definitive Edition, a game which I really love and is a remake of the original Stronghold back a very long time ago, which was a game that I grew up with alongside Age of Empires and the Total War series, as well as the original Harry Potters. So why is it not on the list? Well, because it's a remake, it's a remaster of the original game, so there's some really nice quality of life improvements, some graphical updates, and some wonderful new series of missions. But the gameplay is still the same, nothing's really changed, and unfortunately they didn't get some of the original voice actors back to play Sir Longarm and Lord Woolsack, which I thought would have been lovely, but I get it may not have been possible. But because of that, I'm not sure it can be given its own place on the list, but I wanted to give it a special shout out because I really enjoyed playing it again this year. The other honourable mention in this video will be for We Who Are About to Die, a gladiatorial roguelike game, which is just a really interesting concept. It's a bit silly, sometimes the fighting can be a little bit silly and wacky and all over the place. It's a bit ragdolly, but that's okay. It's a game that I've really been enjoying. But it can't be on this list because it officially released last year. However, there was a major update earlier this year, and that's when I released my video on it. So I would really like to give it an honourable mention because I found myself playing it a lot in my own time, and I just think it's a really neat idea for a game, and I've always wanted kind of a gladiatorial roguelike, and there's only really been one other before that, and it didn't end very well. So I'm really happy that we've got another one now, but it can't make it onto this list because it was officially released in 2022. And my number one game for 2023 is Death Must Die, a game which I never really thought would be making the list because I started playing it today. I sat down just to play it in my own time, having bought it on the Steam sale, and I sat down and played it for 3 hours straight. The bullet hell aesthetics actually work for me. Sometimes I find the bullet hell games can sometimes be a bit overwhelming and not particularly fun, but I really enjoyed it. You know, that all the enemies feel different, including the bosses, kind of the mini bosses, the first bosses, and then the final boss, all feel pretty good as well. The one downside, I think, to it is that it's still in early access and is pretty limited. There's only kind of one arena at the moment, and I believe once you defeat the final boss, that's it. But between rounds of dying, you get to do upgrades, you get to keep equipment, you get to kind of work out what works and what doesn't in terms of damage, what combinations of different gifts from the gods work. And you know, sometimes you can make a really powerful build, and sometimes your builds can be a bit lackluster. For example, I find the assassin to be pretty terrible, but I do find the kind of basic swordsman and the mage to be pretty good indeed. So there will be a full video on that releasing tomorrow, but I think it's a really, really fun little game, and it's under £7 on Steam, which is an excellent quality price, and I really hope to see it progress and become a really, really good game in future. And that ends my video for Games of the Year for 2023, and it's been nice to kind of reflect on the games that I've played this year so far. So I think I'll be doing this every year going forward. Definitely some surprises there with very couple late editions with the Highland Song and Death Must Die, but I really enjoyed them and I think they very much deserve a space on this list. There are plenty of other games which didn't make the cut, and plenty of games I'd have liked to play and then been able to include in this list, but unfortunately I just haven't got around to playing them or haven't had the means to acquire them as of this year. But I'm looking forward to next year, which seems to be a very good year for games, and I'm looking forward to doing the end of the year Games of the Year list at the end of 2024. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.